So to kick things off, I do start with the same boring ass question every time because I just refuse to sit down and think of something better. Simple introduction. Who are you? Why are we having this talk? And just a little background on yourself.
Well, I'm Mack. I'm the lead singer of an Australian band called Everlyne. We've been together for probably about 5 or 6 years,
Yeah.
at this point, I think, something similar to that. About myself, obviously, I'm a singer. I have a degree in music performance, um, and I really like books.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, so let's start by talking about the band a little bit. For those that aren't familiar with you guys, like you said, you've been around 5, almost 6 years at this point, done a few EPs, you've got stuff out there, and it's this really cool project where you're kind of putting your heart on your sleeve all the way through this. And each EP is, I don't want to say like that it's a fully conscious thing where you guys are setting out and going, we're not making the same record twice. I know that's obviously the intent. You'd never want to make the same record twice, but
Yeah.
like there is a distinct sound change or sound progression through the different EPs. How much of that was a conscious choice versus just growing up?
I don't think it was a conscious choice, and more of us really just trying to find our sound. So I think it's more of us just kind of still experimenting around with a bunch of stuff. Um, yeah, we've worked with a couple of different people, so obviously that's kind of contributed to how the sounds turned out. We've just taken like different bands and different songs and stuff for reference, throughout the different processes. And I think with the latest couple of songs that we've released, I think we've kind of found a little pocket that we want to sit in.
Yeah.
We tried to go heavier, we tried to be pop punk, and I think we found this kind of like mix between heavy-ish and a bit like a little bit of like electronic. I think I want to call it like League of Legends theme music. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
But I think that's one of the, I mean, it obviously happens here in the US too, but I've had just an absolute ridiculous amount of Australian bands on the program. So like, I think that's something semi unique to you guys is that it feels like you guys are a little more quick to say that this is our new sound space and this is where we're going to be. Whereas, like in America, it seems like bands will dip their toes in stuff for a while and
mm,
never like fully commit to it. And I think that's something you semi unique to you guys in Australia is like you find that little what makes you feel good or what fans are starting to respond to, and then you go, cool, we found home. Let's do this.
yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Um, let's talk about the Australian music scene some because again, I've had just a ridiculous number of people from that there on the show. I mean, I've talked to Michaela from Yours Truly, Emmy from Red Hook, Emma from the Atomic Bow Project.
Yeah.
Between you and me, like you guys have such a strong stranglehold in this pop punk alternative music scene. What's it like seeing these bands come through the process and maybe being able to take some notes on like, okay, maybe that's not the exact direction we want to go, but that works. Like we know what we're doing.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you mentioned yours truly. We actually just played a show with them probably about 2 weeks ago for the first time, which was really cool. So
Yeah,
actually got to meet Michaela. That
yeah,
was pretty epic. Yeah, just kind of just watching all of those bands, obviously being well, not really new to the scene, but still like trying to come up and make a little bit, make a few waves in the Australian music scene. It's those type of bands kind of really pave the way for the stuff that we want to do. So it's a lot of like drawing inspiration from those type of people, watching how they perform, watching how they like market themselves. And I think one of the biggest things is that they really play into having like the female fronted presence,
hmm
which is something that we've, I suppose, leaned into as well. So really trying to make that sort of the focal point of the band because that seems to be um I don't know, I suppose there's like a huge market for everyone wants to see women do well in the heavy music scene, because for so long it's been such like a male dominated
Yeah.
um scene. So there's just so much support, there's so much like inclusivity within that sort of stuff, which is great to see, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah. And I think, you know, again, that's one of those places where Australia is where I'm noticing it most, but you're kind of unique in your music scene with that because there are so many bands that have female vocalists or whatever. And whereas here in America, like obviously they exist, but they're not the ones getting the showtime, you know.
Yeah.
In Australia, it does seem like that's kind of, whether it's a revolution or whatever, it's been kind of brought to that forefront. And then to your point about getting that recognition, you know, Emmy from Red Hook just won um, a Women in Heavy Music award for the first
Yep.
time ever, you know, like the inaugural award. So, like, you guys, I do think are on that cutting edge, which I think is beneficial to you as a band as well, because now you're already out in a little bit of a spotlight just by being yourself.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the lyrical content of the band. Again, you guys are a little on the nose in the sense that there's clearly messages in your songs, right? They're
Mm,
not as shrouded by metaphor as some other bands try to be, things like that.
yeah.
And that's not a negative thing at all. I think it makes it easier for people to connect to. And some people that I've talked to are like, well, we don't write the on the nose stuff because it's quote unquote too easy. And it's like, but it's not. Like, doesn't that make it
Mm,
harder to talk about that it's
it
really my
does.
story?
Yeah.
Yeah. So for you, what's that been like, you know, over the last 5 or so years, kind of putting your story, and obviously not all of them are just your story, your bandmates'
Mm.
stories and friends, like what's it like transitioning real life into that musical space for you?
Well, I've been lyric writing since I was probably about 10 or 11 years old. And I've always been the kind of person that's really struggled with like expressing how I feel in the moment. And I found that putting that into like songwriting and lyric writing and having it still a little bit shrouded by mist, so it's not as like explicit of me just being like, hey, I feel like this. Um, just kind of it's easier for me to sort of like connect with people around me, and I kind of find it's kind of freeing as well. I find it really cool that if I can write these songs and have these different lyrical content of stuff that's going on in my life or in someone else's life that's around me, and people can connect to that, that's amazing, to be perfectly honest. If I can
Yeah.
sit there and I can put it into words and someone else can go, yes, I feel that way. You put it exactly how I would put it. That's incredible. Like I know one of our songs, Surrender, which came out on our EP from 2022, I think. Um, it wasn't my feelings, but it was something that was going on to someone who's really, really close to me in my life. And they were really struggling, and I really had no idea how to help them at the time. So I kind of put it down into words and decided I'm going to write a song, and this song is going to be for them. And the first time they ever heard us play it live, I made them cry. I was a little bit sad. It was a little bit sad, but I think it had its desired effect, and it really it kind of helps me with regard, like I said, with just putting my emotions out there and being able to connect to the people in my life.
Yeah, no, and I think that's awesome because I think it is one of those things. Um, Emmy and I kind of talked about this with their song Jabberwocky, you know, and
Yeah,
um, being able to take an experience that you have or are going through and to make a song that maybe didn't exist before that is going to connect with someone to say like it's okay that you're in this situation. I'm here too.
yeah, yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So for you, you said you started lyric writing at a young age. When did music kind of become the focal point of like this is obviously something I'd like to do. I'm sure in Australia it's much like America where parents still say absolutely fucking not, like you're not just going to be a musician. So what was it like, trying to navigate those waters?
Well, I'm very lucky that I didn't have to because I grew up with musician parents.
Okay.
So,
Fair.
so my dad's a drummer and a singer, and he dabbles in a whole heap of different instruments. He's one of those type of people. Um, so he's been in cover bands and original bands for longer than I've been alive. So that's been having that, like growing up with that sort of inspiration has been really amazing. Like my mum's always been big into like theater and performing, and she's really loves like directing stage shows. Um, so growing up in that environment was um really paved the way, I suppose, for me trying to get into music and anything that I wanted to do. They were so supportive. They put me in music lessons and vocal lessons. When I told them I wanted to study music in university, they were like, I wish we had these opportunities when we were younger. I wish these were options. So I'm one of those few people that didn't really have to try and navigate those waters, and I'm really grateful for it. Like my parents have been so unbelievably supportive, and my partner's parents, they're not musicians, but they absolutely love coming to watch the band as well. Like their son's the um, guitarist and bass player in the band,
Yeah.
and they are so supportive. They're at every show, which is amazing.
Yeah. See, and that is, I mean, obviously there's some of that in America too, but
Mm.
in America, there's such a heavy focus on the college route still to this day. And it's like, college isn't for everybody, like I'm not saying don't go to school, kids, but like if you have a dream and it's not a traditional dream, like it's okay to try to explore that. Um,
100%.
for you, then obviously, being exposed to it at such a young age and kind of being able to see the ins and outs, what was that transition like for you mentally when you started writing lyrics to try to get your emotion out? Like, was it a very natural feeling thing at that point because you've seen your dad kind of doing the same thing?
Um, it did feel very natural, I suppose. Like I said, growing up with my parents, like dad does songwriting as well, and he has written his own, like a couple of his own plays and musicals. So I was always in an environment where people were writing. Mum's an author as well, so it just felt so natural. Like when I started lyric writing, it just kind of made sense. Like obviously, like in the schoolyard when you see you're just sitting there writing in a book, obviously people
Yeah.
suck and they like try and take it and they're like, what is this? And you're like, oh God, here we go.
Yeah. Yeah.
But once you get out of those like toxic high school environments, it's just there's so much more support, I suppose. Just in like the music industry as a whole. So kind of like getting into that industry. Um, was incredible. You meet so many amazing people that are like, that have been through like similar experiences, and they're like, hey, I went through this sort of stuff in high school as well. People suck. I was bullied for being a performer and wanting to be a singer or a musician. And I see them now, and they are absolutely thriving, which is
Right.
just so cool to see.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of those ironic things to me too, because bullying is ridiculous in the first place. But
Ugh, it's
like
horrible.
like you said, like the theater kids, the music kids tend to be picked on pretty heavily, maybe not the most, but pretty heavily.
Pretty heavily,
But
yeah.
the thing that's so ironic to me is like we all love music. Like even the bully has a favorite band. Do you not
Right?
think that band was the nerd kid in high school too? Like what are you doing? It just makes no sense.
I don't get it.
Yeah. It's so bizarre. Like, obviously we all go through our own things, whatever, but like I can't wrap my head around if roles were reversed, right? And like band
Mm,
kids made fun of sports kids, and it's like, oh, you're gonna be a football player? Like, get real, grow up. And it's like, but there are football players. They exist. They make a lot of fucking money. Like, why would I
right?
not?
Yeah. there are some huge musicians out there that I'm sure copped it in high school that have just sat there and they're like, fuck you.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, you can't tell me Metallica is not going, cool guys, I'm glad you all made fun of us because here we are, you know?
Hope you had fun, but I'm
Right.
now living my best life.
But especially, like the it is hard to get out of Australia, at least to the US, because we're stupid and charge a shitload of money for that. But the visas are insane for you guys to get over to us and perform. But like, the bands that are able to travel to all these overseas locations too, it's like you made fun of this kid in high school for chasing his dream, and now he's, you know, on a jet to fucking Ireland to play a show. Like, what are you doing? Sitting in your house watching the news? Like, grow up.
You're
It's
watching
so
Vampire Diaries again on Netflix.
right, right, absolutely insane. Um, so as you kind of, developed this passion for lyric writing and whatnot, how do you think that started to manipulate your mental health journey? Obviously being in your formative years when you started lyric writing, how did all that kind of meld together? Do you think it was obviously a benefit, or did it detract from maybe being able to address some of the things you were going through?
I definitely think it did kind of hinder my ability to like connect with people properly. Um, because I was so stuck and I'd found my method that worked for me of how to put my lyrics across. But at that point, I wasn't doing anything with them. They were just going in a book and that was going in my
Right.
bag. Like there was nothing being done with them. So it did it kind of stopped me from connecting with people properly. And I really struggled with like forming good relationships in high school. I had so many like there was always like some sort of friendship drama that was going on, like typical high school stuff. But I obviously, because I didn't express to people what's actually going on for me, I just got always like pinned as the bad guy because I couldn't like explain myself and why I do things the way that I do. And because it makes sense in my head. And I still struggle with this, to be perfectly honest. Um,
I think the
I'm a
best of
lot
us
better
do.
at it. Yeah, I'm a lot better at it now, but I still struggle with this. Like if I'm like in the moment and I'm feeling like a really big emotion, I kind of just like shut down and I'm like, I'm not addressing this. I'm not about this right now.
Yeah. I do the same thing, and I've been in a similar situation many times, but where like I'm very much the like analytical, logical. I need to process what I'm feeling before I open my mouth,
Hmm.
because either A, I'm not going to do it and actually convey the right, feeling that I'm expressing, or I'm going to come across very angry and you're going to get mad that I'm being defensive. So I'm the
Yeah.
same way. Like I take in things and then I just kind of sit with them. And I've been confronted about that in, personal relationships and like even work life, where
Mm,
you're just trying to process stuff and it's like, I can't respond to this right now because it's going to be an emotional response and I need to give you the logical
exactly.
response.
Yeah. I need
Yeah.
to stew on this for a bit and think why this is a good idea or why this makes sense before I sit there and I like explode at you because I'm like, why are you telling me off?
Yeah. Absolutely the same way. And I'm a classic overthinker as well. So like I'm one of those
Yeah.
people. I just sent a meme to a few friends earlier that said, don't ever tell me that we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, because I'm already at that
Oh,
bridge and
yeah.
I've got the problem now. So I need to figure it out now.
I've come to that bridge and I've jumped off like 5 times by
Yeah.
now. You need to tell me what we're doing.
Yes, absolutely. Um, so as you kind of progress through high school and start, filling book after book after book of lyrics, when did it click that, okay, now it's time to really express what I'm feeling and what I'm writing?
I suppose I started trying to in high school. I went through a program like we do. like in Australia, we have like our VCE system, which is like your normal school system. And then you can also choose like it's called a vet subject, which is kind of like an external subject that you can pick to do like a university study, like get a
Yeah.
certificate. Um, and you do that with like a whole bunch of other schools in the area, and you all once a week you'll go to the designated school and you'll like learn and do all that sort of stuff. I obviously chose music. So and through that we were encouraged to write music and work together as a band. And I came into that project and I was like, hey, I've got all these books just full of random lyrics. What do you reckon? So I started there. Um, and it was very basic back then. I hadn't obviously lyric writing wasn't as evolved and hadn't grown as much um, because I'd never actually like put it into practice. So it wasn't really, I suppose, until I started with um, Everlyne that I really kind of really wanted to make something, I suppose, and really put something out there and really start expressing like real emotions rather than just kind of shrouding everything in metaphor, like you mentioned before,
Yeah.
which is what I was trying to do. I was trying to say something, but in fact, I was not really saying anything at all. Um,
That's honestly, that's part of the reason I built this podcast is, the little like tagline in my pitch to PR teams and whatnot is that I want to have these conversations without the veil of lyrics. And it's
mm,
because of that exactly where like I as an artist, I think I know what I'm saying. Well, I do know what I'm saying because I'm the one that wrote it. But I
yeah,
think that the listener is hearing what I'm saying, but everybody takes those metaphors and those veils of lyrics in a million different directions, and then you go, oh shit,
they
that didn't
so
land.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I have those issues all the time when I'm writing something for the band, and the band's like, "Oh, you're writing another love song." I'm like, "This isn't a love song. What do you mean?"
Yeah, it's it's bananas, the level of confusion that can come in around that. Like one of my
Yep.
favorite examples of it is Dave Grohl was on the Kelly Clarkson show,
Mm,
and she's talking about how much she loves the Foo Fighters and their song "Learn to Fly," and she thinks it's like
mm.
this grandiose song about like some sort of spiritual like awakening or whatever. And Dave's sitting there and he just kind of lets her get it out, and he goes, yeah, so
Nope.
that song's literally about me wanting to get my fucking pilot's license and learning how to fly.
That's-
He's like, I'm glad you got whatever you got out of it, but that's not what this was at all. Yeah. So crazy. And I think the thing with that is obviously art is subjective, right? And that's something we all learn as we grow up and whatnot. But as an artist, I think the problem often is unintentionally, probably subconsciously, as an artist, we create this piece of art, then we put it out in the world to be interpreted, and we do it with the blinders on because again, we know what that piece of art is. So it's like,
Yeah.
okay, this is going to land with this type of person because they're going through this thing, and then it's like, oh, everybody's loving this song because it helped them get over their dog dying, and it's like, oh, shit, that wasn't what this was like. But I don't want to take that away from them either.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. For you, as you've progressed now through the EPs, um, been able to refine your sound like we were talking earlier, and then just put out Reckless, which is this kind of empowering anthem for people to like realize, hey, everybody's going to have their own fucking opinions, whatever, go live your
Yep.
life.
Hmm.
For you, what
Yeah.
what that song, obviously we know, but like what that song you
Oh, sorry, you're a bit crackly.
and
I think the internet's been a bit.
Hang on,
Oh,
it could be my internet
there you
too.
go.
There we
You're
go.
back. You're back.
All right. All for you personally, what does that feel like now you've got it out there, and kind of what was that connection when you were writing it? Like, was there a moment for you that you were like, I have to stop caring what other people fucking think about what I say?
Uh, to be honest, like when I was writing this one, I was trialing something very different that I hadn't really done before. It was a songwriting method that I learnt in uni, which was to like pick a buzzword and then write down a whole heap of words that kind of relate to it, and then try and string those together. And for me, I'm not that big into like astrology or anything like that, but I picked my star sign, which is a Sagittarius. And I was like, what are the traits of a Sagittarius? And it was all of these like really empowering sort traits that they're very carefree, they're very bold, they're ambitious, they're yeah, they're just all of these really amazing things that I sat there and I was like, I wish I could be a lot more like this. And I suppose that's kind of how the song came to fruition, is like, let's make an empowering anthem out of this. This could be really, really cool. Um, so yeah. But I suppose putting it out there, um, I had gotten to the point where I didn't really care what anyone else thought. Um, well, obviously, everyone still cares what people think,
Right.
but to an extent, I got to the point where I was like, this is what I want to do. Like, obviously, you cop like not being like the typical like female front person, not being like the tiny little um perfect body image sort thing. I was very self-conscious for such a long time. So when I started doing the music, like obviously there was like some really nasty people that come back and make some really horrible comments. And luckily I had a really good team. Like the boys, luckily they'd always manage to get to it first and they delete the comments before I saw anything. And they were just so protective and supportive of me, which has been great. Um, so I kind of got to the point where I'm like, I need to stop caring what people think of me as a person. And I want them to enjoy the music that I make. And I decided that, as well as putting this out to be like an anthem for people to be like, I'm going to be me. I don't give a fuck what everyone else thinks. This was a big thing for me to be like, I'm going to try something new with regards to writing this song. And I went like without sorry, I'm all over the place.
You're
With
fine.
our writing process, with our writing process, we kind of do all the music first, and then I'll get given a bounce of the music, and I'll go into a different room, and I'll write all the lyrics for it. So when I did this, I was like, normally I'm really self-conscious about taking the lyrics to the boys because I'm like, they're gonna judge me, they're gonna hate it. So I took it upstairs and I was like, this is what I got. And they're like, doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, but cool, no worries. And I was like, great. We're trying something new. We're putting ourselves out there. We're sticking it to the man or whatever the saying is. And
Yeah. And
so yeah,
I,
this was kind of huge for me.
yeah, and I was going to say, that's the nice thing with being in the band and having all the different perspectives is exactly that, where like just because it doesn't necessarily land or resonate with every member right off the bat
Mm,
doesn't mean it's wrong or anything like that. Like here's what I'm going through, obviously this is a little bit different, but here's what I'm going through, or here's
yep.
what this song, kind of encapsulates. And then especially being able to kind of mold the song around it at at that point, once they understand the lyrical content and things like that, maybe that riff doesn't go in the hook and it goes in the chorus instead, or there's so much of that where now once we have a full song versus instrumentals or just lyrics, we can piece it together and everybody can connect to it.
Yeah, very much. Yeah.
Yeah. um So you mentioned, you guys just played a show with yours truly not too long ago.
Mm,
You guys have been getting out in the music scene, obviously post COVID. How much different do you feel like the Australian music scene is post COVID? Because you guys went through some of the most intense fucking lockdowns in the world.
we definitely did, especially here in Melbourne.
Yeah.
Like they were brutal.
Yeah. So what was that like for you, going through that and as the proverbial but also realistic doors started to open back up and you guys could start performing again, what's it been like getting back out there now and going, we're here, we've got a little bit of a new sound, here we
Mm,
are.
yeah, well, obviously, we'd only just started like getting onto the scene and releasing music when COVID hit. So we were like in lockdown quite a lot. Luckily for us, I suppose, Nathan and Jordan, who are our bass player and guitarist, they were living together at the time. So they were still able to kind of like write music and they'd send us little bits and pieces. And I suppose that's where we kind of started thinking, let's try something new. And we started like experimenting with new things. And then we got in contact with our producer, a new producer, and we're like, hey, we've got these ideas. What do you reckon? And he was like, cool, I've got a million things that we can try. So um coming out of like COVID obviously was so hard because there were um yeah, like people were still scared to leave the house because of how intense our lockdowns were and how much fear there was around this virus. And obviously there were bands that were like dropping out of shows left, right, and center because someone got COVID and they needed to be in lockdown for a week or two. So it was so difficult coming back out of that. But I feel we're starting to kind of get back to some semblance of normalcy. But it's still getting there. To be perfectly honest, it's still getting there.
Yeah. Well, and I think, America, we just didn't give a fuck. I mean, we obviously locked down, but I obviously do the podcast, I do concert photography, the whole nine yards.
Mm,
And I would say we're back to, if not more, people coming out to shows already than pre, the 2 3 years before COVID. And it's that catch 22 though, right? Like it's really
yeah.
cool to see, but at the same time, it does sit in the back of your mind going, are we fucking up? Like, what if something else is, a different version of COVID exists and we don't know about it yet? Like, is this all
Mm,
going to get taken away again?
yeah, 100%. Like I know there's still people that I see walking around or even that come to shows and they're still wearing like masks because they're just
Mm-hmm.
hanging out the back rather than like in the crowds because they're trying to stay away from people.
Yeah.
Um, and it's crazy. It's been like I suppose it's been nearly 2 years since all of the craziness stopped and we kind of started getting back to normal.
Right.
And it's still kind of getting there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's that a little bit of like the survivalist mindset, right? Like
Mm,
everybody wants to be involved and whatnot. But to your point, the people still wearing masks and stuff. It's like I can't take enough of a risk yet. You know what I mean? There's not enough
yep.
evidence for me to risk it yet, or whatever. Um, and it's who's to say which one's right. For me, it's kind of that mentality of like, obviously, I'm not going to go around like licking doorknobs or something. I'm not that reckless about it, but like I'm not gonna not go enjoy a show either if it's a band that I really like.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. Yeah,
Um,
I think hand sanitizer has become like a permanent thing for a lot of people.
yeah,
So
yeah, for sure. So the new producer that you mentioned is Chris from Wind Waker. Uh,
he is, yes.
let's talk about him a little bit. Let's brag on him. I think, from a production standpoint, hearing, songs that he's been involved with, a great choice for someone that understands how to fuse different elements together. What was it like
Definitely.
approaching him and now working with him a few times and kind of seeing that? in play?
Well, I had obviously heard of Wind Waker and I'd heard a couple of their tracks and I thought their music was really good. Um, we got in contact with Chris through our drummer, funnily enough, because he works as a full-time lighting technician in Australia. And I think he might have done one or two overseas things as well, with like international bands and all that sort of stuff. So he's pretty doing pretty well for himself.
Right.
So his mentor, who he works very closely with, has worked with Wind Waker and is good mates with Chris and had put us on to Chris. And he gave us like that little bit of like a boost and a recommendation, be like, hey, my mate's in this band, they're looking to do some stuff. Would you work with them? And we got in contact with Chris through that. And it's been an incredible process. Like he is so awesome to work with. Like he is always open to ideas and to trying stuff. He's very on me about doing like vocal warm-ups so I don't fuck my voice before we do any before we do any takes, which is amazing because I get really stuck with that sometimes. Um, but he's so good with like bouncing ideas around, like with regards to melodies. He's just brilliant with coming up with like melody ideas and going back and forth with him because I've never had like much of a um I suppose much of like a workshopping thing with regards to lyrics and melodies. I've kind of just been, oh, Mac, that's your job because you're good at that. That's where you kind of like do your thing. And I'm like, I want some help. I want someone to like bounce ideas with. And Chris has been that. And it's been amazing to have that. And he's just so good at what he does. He's just he's just been incredible and he's given us so many connections as well. Like he put us on to Ophelia, um, as well as like the stylist that we got on for the last couple of music videos, as well as their videographer as well. When we brought him down from Brisbane to do our last two videos, and he's kind of just been like he's our godfather.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what he's become for us.
Yeah, like almost a manager without the manager title, right? Like has all the right
Yeah.
connections and can get you in the right places. And I think that's one of those things that I talk a lot on my other podcast to bands about, especially younger bands or newer to a scene or whatever, the importance of networking and never closing doors,
Hmm.
because you never know who that next person is that's going to get you to the next person. In this case, like your drummer talking to his mentor about lighting, getting you to Chris for Wind Waker, the gets you to a videographer and gets you to your PR team. And like, not saying you couldn't have achieved all those same things without him, but
Mm.
what would that
Would have been a
process
lot
have looked
harder.
like? Yeah, for sure. So no, I do. I think it's really cool too that, again, something, the American scene has gotten better over the years, but the Australian scene, one of the things I absolutely love about it is that there's so much camaraderie between all the different bands.
Yeah,
Not saying that there's not competition, because there is, right? Like there's only so many
of
shows
course.
that can be played, whatever. Like there's going to be some of that. But I feel like, at least from the outsider perspective, there's a lot less gatekeeping within the music industry and music scene down there where, hey, like I'll give you a name. I may not be able to like fully go to bat for you, but I'll give you a name. And if it works out, it works out. Or,
Mm.
we'll bring you onto this show and just see what can happen. Whereas, I think in America, there's still a little bit of that like apprehension. Even with as massive
Yeah.
as the US is, bands are so scared to like give out their connections because like it means quote unquote less work for them. That's like, but it doesn't. It means more work for
Ah,
everybody, like,
okay.
yeah, it's kind of a
Yeah.
weird thing sometimes over here. But I think, with the Australian scene as well, something that I was talking to a friend of mine about. Um, this is the out of the 25, you're the 25th episode of this particular podcast. You're number 8 of Australian artists that I've had on here now. So it's like this really crazy thing where that doesn't seem like a huge, percentage or fraction necessarily, but all the others are so scattered that it's like Australia also understands, or their bands understand, like mental health is important and we want to talk about it because we can only get
Yeah,
better if we do.
I 100% agree. Like, I was like we spoke about earlier with Emmy Mack that came on, and she was talking about what happened to her when she went over to Germany and her journey with writing Jabberwocky. Like, I was sitting there and I was like, wow, I've never heard anyone really open up about that sort of stuff
Yeah.
and try and bring awareness to that. And I have so much respect for her for being able to talk so openly about it. And I suppose I kind of wanted to take a leaf. What is it? A page from her book? A leaf from her tree? I think it's a
Something
page
like
from her
that.
book.
Yeah.
Something
We,
like that. Yeah. And I wanted to be a lot more transparent with my music as well. So I suppose when people have questions, I'm not afraid to kind of open up and tell them what it's about, because she's sort of paved the way for that. And she's done it in such a brave, she's been so brave and so amazing and just open with what's happened. And I've never met her, I don't know, but I just amazed, I just instantly feel proud of her for be doing that.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah. No, it is. And I think, it's one of those things that it's it's easy to say, that I'm trying to think of how to word this so that it doesn't come across like negative by any means. Like it's
yeah.
easy for us to say that, oh, she's so brave and whatever, and she
Mm,
is. I'm not taking anything away from her. What I'm
yep.
trying to get across is like our words are not enough to describe how brave she is for saying that. And that goes for
100%.
anybody telling their story, whether it's as extreme as what Emmy went through or
Mm,
it's much less extreme. And I'm not going to give examples because to anyone, like whatever you go through is obviously an extreme thing. It's a personal experience. And
100%.
I think it's really important that people understand that just because it wasn't a sexual assault or something, quote unquote heinous, doesn't mean
Yeah.
that it's not important for you to talk about or that it wasn't a legitimate trauma.
100%. Yeah. Like there's always things that people have gone through that they're like, oh, I've gone through this, but it's not as bad as what other people have gone through. And they're just diminishing their own feelings. And it's something that you see quite a lot. And I suppose it's like a lot of like things that I suppose some people grow up with as well, where you're like, oh, you're going through this, but it's not as bad as XYZ. Like I know something my parents use a lot is like, it's not as bad as the starving children in Africa. And you sit there and you're like, oh, well, and you grow up with that sort of like mentality where you just sit there and you diminish your own feelings to a point where you're like, it doesn't matter because it's not this extreme. But in actuality, like it's probably mean like this thing is probably a lot for you and it's very impactful. It's obviously something that you're feeling and you shouldn't have to feel like you need to diminish yourself and um not express how you feel and just because it's not as bad as what someone else has gone through. Like,
Right. Yeah. And, I think Emmy and I talked about it, and David from Bellhaven, we were talking
yep.
about the that same mentality where like if someone broke their leg, you wouldn't walk up to them and be like, "Oh, at least you didn't get shot." Like, so why do we do that for other types of trauma? Mental health
Yeah,
issues and whatnot. Like, oh, you're overreacting. It could be this, and it's like, right, but that doesn't mean that this still doesn't hurt.
exactly.
It's mind blowing, right? Like,
It's baffling.
yeah. Um, so for you, as you progress through the music scene, and have this focus on mental health without the unfortunate stigma that still exists where people think that
Mhm.
artists only write about mental health because it's the quote unquote trendy or cool thing to do, which is not why any artist that I've ever talked to has written you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
if
it's
they're
not
writing
at
for
all.
that reason, then they're going to fail. Like that's where the authenticity comes in. So for you, as
Exactly.
you come up through this authenticity and writing this way, and performing these songs, how important is it for you to not sacrifice that, right? Like to not quote unquote sell out to, well, we're only going to write pop hits because that's the safe space, if you will.
Mm. Yeah, um yeah, I kind of threw that out the window when we wrote Surrender. Surrender is a very, very heavy topic. And as I mentioned, it's about someone that was close to me. I'd actually written it about a couple of different people that had gone through very similar experiences. They'd like experienced either a miscarriage or they'd had um, an abortion and something had gone wrong with it. And someone very close to me ended up in the hospital because it hadn't completely worked and they just randomly started bleeding at work one day and
Mm-hmm.
they had to be rushed to emergency because and all of that sort of stuff had happened. And I was terrified because this person means the world to me and I don't know what I'd do without them. And um I really I didn't know how to express that. And I thought I was really upset one day and I needed to get it out. And that's how Surrender came about because I started writing it down on paper and I started writing it about one person. And then I started thinking about what this other person who was currently in the emergency room was going through. And I was like, I want to tell their story. It doesn't necessarily need to be about them. It could be
Right.
a bit more generalized and it could be like about absolutely anybody. I don't want to sit there and like give them away because it's not I suppose it's in a way it's not my story to tell, but I kind of wanted to write it from a perspective of I understand what you're going through and I want to be able to like put this across in a way that I want you to feel that what you're going through, it's okay. Like
Right.
I want you to be okay. Um, and like I mentioned, when we played this song live and they came to the show for the first time, I made them cry and I didn't want to make them sad at all, but I was so inspired by them and they were so thankful that um and for the song. And I got off stage and I went straight to them and I gave them the biggest hug. I was like, I didn't mean to make you cry, but I want you to know that I'm so proud of you for getting through that. And I want you to know that I'm always going to be here for you. I understand like you have been through this struggle and I just want you to be okay.
Right. Right. No, and I think, you make the comment that it's not technically your story to tell, which is true to some extent, maybe. But
Mm,
I think the beautiful thing about music and artists and lyricists and this whole space is you have the unique opportunity to give a voice to the people that feel like they don't have one. So, while it may not be technically your story, it's still a story worthy of being heard. And I think that's the important part. And, people, whether they will admit it or not, the most hard ass person on the planet still just wants to be seen as a person, and
100%
at
they
the end
do.
of the day, everybody is a person and we're all humans. We have our own fuck ups and mistakes and
Yeah.
traumas that we go through. And to just hear that we're not alone in those battles is one of the most empowering and kind of reassuring things that you can have, right? That
Yeah.
okay, this person's made it through that, I can get through that.
Yeah. Very much.
Yeah. um so we've all heard the cliche version of this, but I do like this as kind of one of my questions as we transition towards the end here.
Mm,
The cliche is that we grow up to be the person that we needed when we were younger, right? So
mm.
what would current Mac go back and tell yourself at your darkest and lowest point, what advice would you give yourself?
Oh God. Um, it's look, I'm still on a bit of a journey myself at the moment. Like I've recently been diagnosed with ADHD, and obviously like going through as a kid or as a teenager and not knowing that um you have that, and people just kind of look at you and they think you're weird and they don't kind of get it. I don't know if you'd necessarily like I don't know if I'd necessarily tell myself um that's what it is, but it's kind of like it's probably the cliche of everything's going to be okay, like things will make sense, like there's you're not crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I totally feel you on that. Earlier this year, I got my own diagnosis. It was, in fact, right before I talked to Emmy.
Mm,
And same thing, I knew that I had struggled for literal decades, but I never went and figured out why.
yeah,
And I think for me, kind of similarly, like I would go back. Obviously, you're going to make it, you're going to be okay. But I think I
yeah,
would tell myself that if you feel like you're struggling with something, it's okay to open up about it because there's something else here and you need to find out what that other thing is because
yeah.
that's how you're going to address it. Um, One of them that I absolutely love, I talked to Matty Mullins of Memphis May Fire, and he had made the comment that he would tell younger Matty Mullins that, it's, I'm going to paraphrase it a little bit, but basically he said, like, it's okay to be angry. It's okay to feel all the feelings that you feel. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to go through these things and have really big emotions. But when it's time to be happy, you're allowed to be happy. And like that hit me
I
like a
like
ton of
that.
fucking bricks because I know for a fact I've not allowed myself to be happy because I didn't feel like I deserved it because of
Yeah,
whatever I was going through.
yeah, I can definitely identify with that too. Yeah. Sometimes you're going through some stuff and you're like, why am I happy right now when I know there's like something else that's going on? Like there's no point. Like if someone around you is not feeling 100%, you kind of feel guilty for being
Right.
in a really good mood.
Yeah.
But I suppose like you need to allow yourself those good moments. Even like I don't, it's yeah, it's really good advice. I think
Yeah.
I need to take that on board now.
Right. Right. After he said it to me, like even though he was saying it to himself, I was like, cool, Maddie. That's going in my locker now because
Oh,
I needed that.
that hit
Um,
home.
yeah, it really does. And I think, again, tying it back to music too, that's why people, you know, it's so funny to me how many primarily older generation, but it happens in all age groups, I guess,
Mm,
how people look at the alternative music scene with kind of this side eye. They don't really understand it, whatever.
yeah,
And it's like, okay, I could go listen to the top 40 radio and just listen to pop hits, whatever. But there's no, I shouldn't say no, there's much less substance to them. Whereas in this alternative scene, like these are the people that have went through what I've went through and that I can identify with. And I think it's really important to keep kind of nurturing that, and through you doing live performances and then meeting with fans after the show or whatever, to hear that, hey, this song helped get me through something is more valuable than any fucking streaming numbers,
yeah,
any paycheck that could come. It's just there's something
100%.
totally different about it.
It's when hearing something like that, when someone's like, this song got me through something that was really difficult, it's like, and it's like an absolute honor, to be perfectly honest, to be like, I've been able to create something that has actually helped somebody, and it's the most incredible feeling.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those, unfortunately, not everybody will get to experience it in their lifetime because obviously
Yeah,
everybody's on different journeys or whatever. But when you hear, and I'm not saying go out and try to be this person just to be this person or to hear it, right? Like don't get
yeah,
a savior complex about it. But like when you hear like this song or this thing that you did meant this to me because whatever, like really take that in and absorb it, because while it's important to you just to hear those words, it's more important for them to be able to tell you those words.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So as we transition to the end here, what's the rest of the year look like? Kind of what are your plans? What are you allowed to say without getting in trouble? You know, new music, shows, videos, things like that, or even leading into, 2024.
Um, well,
Obviously
we
writing
have
as much as possible, but
a always, always. I've always got a pen in my hand. Um, yeah, we do have a show coming up in about 2 weeks' time that we're playing with an artist from Western Australia called Rin Rin,
Mhm.
as well as a couple of other amazing artists. One of them I have had the absolute honor of actually going on tour with when their singer had just had a baby, and they asked me to fill in for an Australian tour for them. So this is my first time getting to like play on a lineup with them as their whole since their singer's back. So I'm very excited about it. Um,
Is that
yeah,
Penny Parker?
we it is not Penny Parker with the band's called Ghost Seeker.
Oh, okay, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I've known those guys for years, and I was so excited to go on tour with them. It was the best experience. I've never done an Australian tour, so I was like, yes, take me with you.
Yeah.
But I think we've definitely got some more stuff in store for next year. We've already got something that has been recorded, and um, we do have plans to go back and visit our good friend Chris and see what else we can come up with together. But um, yeah, I think that we're just gonna like see the year out and just take things as they go, roll with the punches as it is.
Yeah,
So yeah,
that's cool. And I think, the thing for people to remember is it it's so easy to feel like every time a band drops a new song, new EP, whatever, like, oh, they should be on the road. First off, that's fucking expensive. So
I
keep
don't
that
have that
shit
kind
in
of
mind.
money.
Yeah. uh, Second, obviously, even some of people's favorite bands still have a day job. So like getting the time off to
Yeah,
do a tour doesn't necessarily work.
I only
Um,
have 4 weeks of annual leave. Sorry, guys.
right, right. That's why little weekend runs happen all the time, is because
Yeah,
I can get off work, I can go play a Friday night show, a Saturday night show. If Sunday's close to home, I'm good. Like,
yeah.
um, but no, the other side of that I think is too, like, don't I I have friends that do this and that annoys the shit out of me. I they'll
Just
hook
call
on
them
to,
out.
but they'll know who they are if they listen to this episode. But like they'll hook onto a song that is the new release. So for you, Reckless, for example, and then because nothing else comes out within the next like 3-4 weeks, it's like they forget about the band until something else comes
Yeah.
out, and it's like, what the fuck just happened? I have one friend in particular, I won't use his name, but again, he knows who he is if he's listening, that I literally sent an album link to this morning, and he's like, yeah, I don't think I've ever heard him. And then I sent like the last album to him again, and he goes, oh yeah, I remember these guys. I was like, bro, that was 6 fucking months ago. Like, why do you forget this stuff?
I hate
So
to say I can be a little bit like that
my
too.
point
Oh
though
God.
is put them on a playlist. Enjoy the song all the time. Don't just wait for it to pop up on like release radar or whatever.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, I put things on a playlist, but I've got like this giant Spotify playlist that's got like 3,000 songs. And then I
Okay.
like condense them into playlists that probably have like 50. And I just listen to those on